Good afternoon. I wanted to do a short video, could be a long video, about the Tachyon splice for the SpLIFE program. And I want to start out by saying that I have some concerns about how this splice comes out. I've done close to 20 of them now, and I'm not happy with pulling it down past the berry the way that we're doing, and I'm not happy with the thinness that ends up here, because Tachyon has the triple core in it, and when we do the instructions, we end up with just the reduced core and the reduced cover in this section, and I find that the bend radius doesn't match the rest of the rope. It's a little too thin in this first section, and then there's a lump here where the crossover of the triple core and the cover exists, and I have yet to be able to create this without that really noticeable lump and without the thinness here. Certainly the splice is nice and loose and great, but what bothers me too is that I can then just grab this and pull this splice back out, meaning that the whipping is going to have to do something that no whipping has ever had to do before. All the splices that we've ever made lock in place. The whipping is there for no load conditions, so that when the splice is bent or put away under no load conditions, when this loosens up, that doesn't back out. It's not there to add any strength to the splice or security. So I have some concerns. So I've been scratching my head and dreaming about it, and last night I finished up splicing in the evening, and I went to bed, and I came up with this other idea that was in my brain when I woke up. And so what I did was I did the splice very similar, but I did it in such a way that the core is now in here, and it thickens this piece back up. And what I'd like to do is demonstrate that splice on video, so maybe it will spark some more discussion or thoughts. So this one still has the flatness to it, still has the looseness in the eye, in the throat, but it doesn't have a reduction of diameter to the rest of the rope. So, and I have it's completely imperceptible down here. There's no lump at all. And so I'm gonna make a bunch of these and send them in to be brake tested as well, and see where it all comes out. So the piece that we'll do next is ash. And I'll be using these one-page directions that I've developed over the years, and I won't share those with the group right now, but just recognize I'm going to be doing everything off that one page. Okay, for marking, to mark A is we're going to be going 15 3/4. So this is an 8-inch crossover sheet, so it's 8 inches here to here. So we'll take 8 plus 8, and we'll come back 1/4 of an inch, and we're gonna use a marker strand. That's mark A. Mark B, it's going to go 2 3/4 up the rope. 1, 2, And 3/4, we'll use this strand here. That's mark B. The goal with the marker is not to catch the core. And then mark C will be 6 inches, 4, 5, 6 to here. And there we have it. And all this does is ensure that there won't be any marks on the rope when we're finished. And now that we have those on, we're gonna mark the rest of the cover. So the traditional way that we do that is we're going to start at mark A, and we're going to count down 8 picks towards the tail. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. At the 8th mark, I'm going to put a line all the way around the rope. Like so. And we call that mark SOT. That's the start of taper. And now we're going to put the taper pattern on. I'll identify a V pattern like this right here, and we'll skip one and we'll mark one. So we'll go here and here, skip one and mark one, skip one and mark one, skip one, mark one, skip one, mark one. We'll stop to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Skip one, mark one. There's our 6 taper patterns. Cool. The next step is to pull the core out here at mark B. But before we do that, we're going to tie a knot. And the knot that we're going to use is a little bit different. So we're going to go up a wingspan here. And then I'm going to come up just a tiny bit more for the knot. I'm going to do a slip knot. I'm going to go counterclockwise on top. The part that I'm splicing goes up through the hole. And then I'm going to take a half hitch and lay that on top. And what this is a knot that, it's the shortest knot I can tie, that I can untie half of it and still have an anchor. Now the half that I want to untie eventually will have some slack in it for later use to bury the eye. And it doesn't always come into play, but when it does, it's a lifesaver. All right, so we're back here. We've got SOT, A, B, and C. And we're going to open up the core here at B. I'm going to go about 6 or 7 picks away. Start moving some fibers. Hold the location, and we'll move the other half of the V away. All right. Now I'm going to mark this right at the exit point here. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Okay. I'm going to use the fid against my sternum just as a third hand to hold my location while I open up the rest of the weave. And this is really no work. I'm not pushing with the fid, not doing anything, just holding it in place. Now I'm going to grab some more of the core, and I'm going to push straight through, making sure that I'm clear of the cover. Like so. I'm going to slide the fid in sideways, pinch, and roll. And the core is removed. We'll get rid of our marker strand. rid of these two tracers first. And as this comes out, just pinch it right at the very tip of the rope. And we're gonna do what's called a pirate flag. Just flag it for later. Okay. I want to pull this out. So I'm going to be disturbing the rope. I'm going to be changing the orientation between the cover and the core to move that up. And I'm going to remove these tracer strands. And what I've noticed after a few of these splices is that on the core, I would like to have just a tiny bit more cover. So instead of using this mark where we came out, I'm just going to move it up 1/4 of an inch. That's going to be my new Mark 1 on the core. Mark 2 on the core is going to go to 2.75. 2.75. And this is Mark 2. This is the line. It's not a dot, it's a line. It's important. Dots are not important. Seeing as how we never use that again. But this is important, and it's going to line up with the SOT mark. So when those two line up together, that's going to be my crossover. And then finally, Mark 3 on the core is going to be 15 3/4, otherwise known as 40 centimeters. And there's 8. And there's 16, so we'll come back and we'll put a dot at 15 3/4 or 40 centimeters. So there's my core all marked. All right, so what I'll do is flatten this out. We're gonna mark the core for reduction. And I'm going to use a fine point pen here. So I'm going to choose these two strands right here and these two strands, no, these two right here. All right, so now we're going to count 1, 2, and this is the third one. And we're going to use this strand and this strand, and we chose back here the one on top, so we'll choose the one on top here and here, and we'll count 1, 2, and we'll go here and here, and we choose the one on top, there and there. So 1, 2, 3, one more set, 1, 2, and here, and one on top there. So there's our strands marked. We're going to pull those out right away. A tiny bit of resistance from the tape at the end, but by then I have plenty of core out, so I don't have to worry about it. There's 2 sets. Three sets. And the 4th set. All right. Now, something that I want to note here is that this taper is about 6 1/4 inches long, and that'll come into play later. So just Just a note there. It's written in on the instructions, but they're about 6 1/4 inches. I have plans for another version of this splice where we spread this out a little further, but we'll go with this one for today. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my purple cores out at Mark II, and this is a temporary move. I'm going to use this as a tool in a minute, but I want it removed from the tail. And we can double check that we got those right. So it should be sets of 2, 2, 2, 2 all the way around. It should be nice and uniform, which it is. Okay, now what I'd like to do here is pull the core into the cover. Use the wire fid, laying it right on the table in here. Wire fid goes up. We're going to check it just by pulling that, and that's all good. Moves freely. And instead of coming out at A, which is where the mark is, we're going to come out at SOT. So you go in the top and out the bottom at SOT. And when I do this, I usually come out one pick before SOT. Like so. And SOT stands for start of taper. And what I'll do is lay this out and make sure that there's no twist in the core. That's all nice and smooth. And I'm going to use the pirate flag here to just go into the fid so I don't have to fight with getting the cordage in. And I'll just grab that tail and pop it in place. And we're going to cut the tape off. We're going to pinch this nice and tight, cut the tape off so that we don't pull any fibers and upset the weave. Bend this bullet back, and we'll see how ash works. This is the first piece of ash I've tried, so that goes right in. The bullet is now right here, so we're going to put a little bit of tension on that. And then we'll put our hand up here, slide that through. Put a little more tension. There we go. So all we need is that much out. I like to flatten this gently. That reminds me that the two pieces are laying side by side. Now the next step is to thin out the cover and get it ready to bury in at Mark II. And we're going to come out about 1 inch down from Mark III. So we'll pull these tapers next. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Everything gets double checked so that we don't make any errors. And I always like to start closest to the tail. Other people have said they like to start further from the tail, but I like less friction. And I also keep an eye on these. If I start pulling a piece that's already pulled, I know that I'm going to have to make an adjustment on my taper. And I'll know that before I cut. Halfway done. Sorry to make you sit through yet another taper pattern being pulled. I think we all haven't seen enough of that. But I'm not a good video editor. I do everything in one take. And it is what it is. That's why they invented tea, so you could grab a cup of tea and sit and watch the same thing over and over again. All right, looks like one last set. Now this 8 picks to SOT is something that goes across every rope manufacturer. Every splice instruction I've ever read for double braid includes this SOT, which is a full diameter chunk that gets buried inside the splice to lock the splice in place. And I like that convention, and so I wanted to continue with it. All right, so now we'll check these before we cut them. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So we've got exactly what we want. And now we'll cut these out. And check to see, we'll flatten that out to make sure it's nice and uniform, which it is. So I'm gonna pull a little bit of this core out like this, because what I like to do is from here where I'm gonna go in to here, I like to have that be nice and straight. And what I'm gonna do is use these purple core tails as a little bit of a tool, and I'm gonna pull against it and bunch that up nicely. And what that does is it shortens the distance that I have to put the fid in, and it also gives me kind of a place to follow with the fid. So here we go. We're gonna come in here about 1 inch above, and we can just follow this purple core right up the center. And come out where it exits. And a cursory inspection shows me that we're looking good. So now we'll use tape again. This time we don't use a pirate flag, but this was the tape at the end of the rope when we first started. We're gonna flatten that out like a little pancake, slide that in, lock it in place. And again, we'll use scissors to cut the tape off, even though it's not very sticky. I don't like unbalancing the rope by having it grab onto one fiber, one strand. So we'll bend this back and we'll begin the process of smoothing this down through a little bit at a time. And out we go. So at this point, I'm gonna take the purple guys and scoop them out because I'm done using them as a tool. I want them to come out here where my core came out. So we'll pull those out here. Okay. And now the splice in general looks like this. What we're gonna do next is pull our crossover together. So we have SOT and we have Mark II, and we're gonna bring those up to each other. There's no twist in this, so that's nice. And we'll pull a little bit on the cover, and a little bit on the core, and a little bit on the cover. Now I do agree with Joe that this is a finicky, we can pull this too hard, and I have been guilty of that a couple times. So I'm gonna try to be gentle about it, but still make a nice tidy crossover and try not to create too much of a hole here at the base. So we'll spread those out. All right, so now if you could back up just a little. What we've got now is these two pieces. What I wanna do now is I wanna find out where I'm gonna cut this tail off. So I'm gonna pinch here at the crossover, and I'm gonna suck that tail in and equalize that. And so that's gonna be the chunk that I'm gonna cut off. So what I'll do is I'll pinch that here at this little orange guy, pull that out, and we're gonna cut that right at the orange guy. Okay. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna fill up this section, because this is the part of the splice that was a little bit thin in the previous iterations that we were working on. So what I'm gonna do is straighten this out, and I'm gonna use the wire fid to now pull this core back inside. And I want it to exit up here at SOT. So we're gonna open up the weave here a tiny bit. Pop that in. And we're gonna slide the fid right out here. Pop those 3 core strands in, and then we're gonna pull those right up inside the core, or the cover, and bring them out, okay? Now what we'll do is we're gonna taper this piece of cover, the amount, like we said earlier, the extended amount of this taper is 6 1/4 inches. It just so happens that according to our chart, these scissors are 6 1/4 to the tail. So what I'll do is measure it out like this, from the tail to the tip of my scissors, and we'll put a nice heavy mark on there. So that is the distance. If I taper this piece, that will match the taper of the core when everything is pulled together. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull a left strand right at the mark. And we're gonna cut it at a nice taper. And then we're gonna pull a right strand at the mark. And I'm gonna cut that taper such that it is about a 1/2 inch away from the previous taper. Because I have 12 pieces to cut over a 6 1/4 inch piece, or basically 6 inch distance. So if I do 1/2 inch between them, it'll work out just perfectly. But I guess we'll find out. So we'll cut this blue guy at a nice steep angle, and then we'll take this orange guy right here. And my goal here is to leave as much of the weave together as possible, retaining as much bulk and strength as I can. But also cutting every taper at a beautiful taper, so that there are no perceptible bumps anywhere. And we're getting down to the end. We'll see how we did. Got 2 left, and 1 is here. And then this one is the one that we call sexy time. Just a whisker off the tip. Cool. All right. Now what we'll do is we'll grab the rope at the crossover here and just gently suck that in. We'll pull on the purple guys and pull that in, and then we'll do the final bury of that core or cover. And that disappeared inside just like we wanted it to. Okay. Now the last thing we need to do with this part here is we're going to use our hand on the inside of the thing, and we're going to suck that in as where it wants to be. This is our exit point. We'll pinch that, and we're going to taper this over 3 inches. So I'm going to cut it off here. And we're going to taper this over 3 inches. So the first one, we'll cut about 3 inches down at a nice smooth taper. And then we'll go about 1.5 inches up, nice smooth taper. And then we'll do a little sexy time on that. Boom, like that. Then now when I put my hand down in the loop again, those will all disappear just like they're supposed to. So now our core, our triple core ends at SOT about 1.5 inches down where the, we're about halfway through the 2-2-2-2-2 taper. And then where the 2-2-2-2-2 taper ends, our final piece is. So that's tapered inside like this at that taper. And now this is going to be tapered over 6.25 inches where that taper exists. So we shouldn't have any changes in diameter. Now the last step I want to do here is I want to taper this core sticking out. And the way that I like to do that is I like to come up from the crossover about 2 picks and stick a needle through. And then I'm going to smooth this against the needle, nice and tight, all the way up. And we're going to put a dot there. That's going to be our exit point. Right here. Okay. Now, how I decided the length of the taper here is I like to go 2/3 of the distance to the start of the throat of the splice. And it turns out that at full elongation, it's about this distance, and this distance happens to be 3.5 inches. So we've checked that on our sheet. We've checked it here. And now what we'll do is we'll pull this out against the needle. The needle's preventing this from displacing the crossover. And now we'll just cut this off so that the dot disappears. And then we'll double check our measurement from the tip here up. That means I can safely taper all the way to there without having to worry about it being in the eye. So this taper is a little bit tighter than the other one, where we used a 1/2 inch in between. I'm gonna basically cut these at a nice straight taper, 2 by 2. And I'm gonna start this taper and finish it where the other taper ended. So that'll be about like that. And we have 2 left, so this one halves it there. And then the final cut is you take these 2, and sexy time looks like this. One of them gets a bunch taken off, the other one just gets a whisker, so they're sharp like that. All right. So now all we do is we come back, put our fingers in the needle, we pinch right there at the throat, slide this down, and this disappears right inside. Oh, bummer. I just upset my braid with the needle, which I haven't done before, but it's always best to catch something like that on camera. My gravest apologies for that. We'll try to rebalance that as best we can. Fortunately, it looks like I pulled it off from the tail here. I haven't done that before in all the years of splicing with that process. So certainly this is the best time for it to happen. would not have risked that on video. And since I'm a terrible editor, you get the benefit of it. And in the interest of integrity, we won't be saying, oh, that's close enough. We'll actually chase it all the way out. And there it is. Okay, good. Now we're back to square one. All right, now we can pull our needle out. Okay. So now we're ready to go bury. So what we'll do is we'll take a carabiner in our eye. We call this the slip lock knot because it's a slip knot with a half hitch lock on top. We'll take a pair of scissors and 2 beaners and we'll go finish this up. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to pinch at the crossover. We're going to slide all the slack out of the eye and push that up the rope. And then we're going to take this hand and slide it down the rope, smoothing that loop. And using the left hand, we're going to protect any slack from coming up. We're going to bring this right down to the first taper that needs to be cut. Put our left hand in here. And we'll get all this stuff on the same side. Now, I find that this is a wonderful step to stop at. I like to pull on these to tighten up that weave, just firmly enough just to tighten anything that's loose on the back side. And that really sets the balance, I think. All right, so now we'll make our first cut. And then we'll push the slack up, we'll grab 2 inches of slack, and we'll bring it down to the next one. And we'll make our second cut. And our third cut. Good sharp scissors help. And we'll bring down a little slack to our fourth and final cut. And because there's tension on the eye, these are less likely to come unraveled. Okay, move this over to a carabiner now. So what we can see is this is our SOT. There's our 8 picks inside. And then this is the little tracer mark, the one I put in the beginning. that needs to be buried. That's mark A. So our crossover's almost in, then we have to go this much further. Okay, now what I've found is using the exit point where we first open up the rope leaves us with a little bit of a lack of cover to finish the splice. So what we'll do is we'll come up here and we're going to take the half hitch off the top of this, like so. And then we'll also be able to pull some of this slip knot through until we can put a carabiner back in it. Now what we'll do is we'll pull on this to equalize it, to lock it in place, to dress and set it so we don't go flying across the room later. And we'll take the slack from here that was stored in that half hitch and in the tail, the bunny ear, and we'll bring that down, keeping tension on the eye. And now we have a fair amount of slack here to work with, and we should be able to pull that in. Okay. And we'll give that a nice tug. And so to finish this, what I like to do is do the 4 directions. Bend it all the way one way, all the way the other, all the way to the east, all the way to the west. So north, south, east, and west. And then we're gonna go ahead and pull down the slack one more time. And I'd like to get this eye to be dead nuts tight. There's a fair amount of slack here. So that's dead nuts tight, and you can just barely see mark A, that's the tag. I'll pull that out with tweezers later. It's only a tiny little piece. And that's kind of done. Now the last step is to equalize by pulling it in the opposite direction. Here's our mark B, or our mark C. We'll just pull that out, we're done with that. And what I want to show you is that there's a little bit of a difficulty now. When I go to set this in the opposite direction, we're going to lose some ground on the splice. So we'll put the hand right up here and we'll pull, and that moves quite a lot. That's not normal for splices that I'm used to. Our crossover is still in here, but I'm gonna now rebury this. And I have an idea. I'm gonna use a DMM micro beaner to put this eye down even further than it already is, because I can retighten it, but then when I go back, what happens is I pull on it again to set it, and it pops right back out. So I'm gonna grab a little beaner. And we're gonna try to overbury the eye in such a way that when we pull back down on it, it's where we want it to be. Okay, so let me pull this back down the other direction. Make it super small, like this, and then we'll pull it back the other way and see if it equalizes where we want it. Turn it this way. Still moved a fair amount. Right, let's check it with a beaner. So that's the finished size. retaining lots of flexibility, and the eye is still very flat. I think if I want to modify this a little bit more to give it a little more security, I'm going to add, instead of 8 picks, I'm going to add another 4 to 6 picks on the next splice to see if I can get that crossover buried a little bit deeper and provide a little bit more security, because I don't like the fact that that moves in its final configuration. See, it tightens right up, but we'll pull on it one more time. And I fear that we're gonna see the same thing. We're just gonna see that pop straight down like that, which I believe it's locked in place. And the great thing about this splice now is that there is no change in diameter through here. It's completely imperceptible from this taper all the way up the body of the rope. There's absolutely no change in diameter whatsoever. So I like that about it, but I still haven't figured out this lock. So thanks for watching. That was a long video, but here we are.